There is a specific kind of satisfaction that comes from watching someone who humiliated you realize they've made a catastrophic mistake. Not just a small mistake, a career-ending, reputation-destroying, life-altering mistake. My name is Olivia Chen. I'm 31 years old, and 6 weeks ago, my sister's boyfriend stood up at a family dinner and mocked me in front of 20 people for being unemployed. He said, and I quote, "Must be nice to sleep in every day while the rest of us actually work for a living." He said it with a smirk, with condescension dripping from every word, with the absolute confidence of someone who thought he was punching down at someone beneath him. 20 people laughed, some uncomfortably, some genuinely. My sister laughed the loudest. What none of them knew, what my sister's boyfriend definitely didn't know, was that I wasn't unemployed. I was the CEO and majority owner of a tech company worth $42 million. The same company that his firm had been desperately trying to partner with for 8 months. The same company had a meeting scheduled with his boss the following Monday. The same company that I'd built from nothing while he'd been climbing the corporate ladder on someone else's dime. So when he called me unemployed, when he mocked me in front of my entire family, I made a decision. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend myself. I didn't say a single word. I just smiled, finished my dinner, and went home. And then I destroyed his career so completely that 6 weeks later, he's unemployed. Actually unemployed, not CEO of her own company unemployed, blacklisted from the industry unemployed. This is the story of how my sister's boyfriend humiliated me at a family dinner, and how I responded by showing him exactly who he'd been mocking. Before I tell you what I did in that Monday meeting, before I tell you how his boss reacted when he found out his employee had insulted me, before I tell you about the phone call my sister made when she finally learned the truth, I need something from you. If this story is already making you grin, if you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought they were better than you, if you've ever been mocked for something that wasn't even true, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel if you want real stories about women who built empires while people thought they were doing nothing, who let people underestimate them, who smiled quietly while planning perfect revenge. And drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, your city, your country. Tell me if you've ever been called lazy or unemployed when you were actually building something. Tell me your story. I read every single comment. We're builders here, and we don't waste energy defending ourselves to people who don't deserve explanations. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, because to understand why I let him think I was unemployed, you need to understand my sister and the lie she'd been telling about me for 3 years. I need to tell you about my sister first, because none of this makes sense without understanding who she is. My sister's name is Emily. She's 2 years younger than me, 29, and from the moment she was born, she was everything my parents wanted in a daughter. Beautiful, charming, socially adept, she followed every rule, met every expectation, became exactly who they wanted her to be. She went to a good college, got a degree in marketing, got a corporate job at a pharmaceutical company, makes $75,000 a year, has a nice apartment, a nice car, a nice boyfriend named Derek. She's the golden child, the one my parents show off, the one they're proud of. And then there's me. I've always been different, awkward as a kid, more interested in computers than people, more comfortable with code than conversation. I went to MIT, got a degree in computer science. My parents were proud of that, but what happened after graduation, that's where I disappointed them. I didn't get a corporate job. I didn't climb a ladder. I didn't get a nice office with benefits and a 401k. I started a company at 23 years old, right out of college. A software company, developing AI-powered project management tools for mid-sized businesses. Nothing flashy, nothing consumer-facing. B2B software. the kind of thing that's incredibly profitable, but that most people don't understand or care about. I started it with two classmates from MIT, Michael and Priya. We split the equity 3 ways. Each of us owned a third. For the first 2 years, we made almost nothing. We lived in a tiny apartment together, shared one car, ate ramen, worked 18-hour days building the product. My parents were worried. They kept asking when I was going to get a real job, when I was going to have stability, benefits, security. My sister openly mocked me. At family dinners, she'd say things like, "Still playing with your little startup, when are you going to grow up and get a real career?" Year 3, we got our first major client, a manufacturing company with 5,000 employees. They paid us $200,000 for our software and implementation. We were profitable. For the first time, we could pay ourselves actual salaries. I made $60,000 that year. Not great, but enough to move into my own apartment. My parents relaxed slightly. At least I wasn't homeless. But they still saw me as less successful than Emily. She had a corporate job, a title, business cards, an office, things they understood. I had a company they didn't understand, doing work they couldn't explain to their friends. Years 4 and 5, we grew. More clients, bigger contracts. We hired developers, built out a team. Our revenue hit $2 million, then $5 million. I was making a good salary by then, $120,000, but I was reinvesting most of the profit back into the company, growing it, scaling it. My family still saw me as struggling because I didn't talk about money, didn't show off, drove a Toyota instead of a BMW, lived in a modest apartment instead of buying a house. I was quiet about my success, deliberately quiet, because I've learned that when you're building something real, you don't need to broadcast it, you just keep building. But my sister interpreted my quietness as failure, and she started telling people I was struggling. At family gatherings, she'd say, "Olivia's still trying to make her startup work. It's been years. I keep telling her to just get a regular job." The truth, by year 6, we'd grown the company to $15 million in revenue. We had 40 employees, offices in San Francisco and Austin, major clients across the country. And I'd bought out one of my co-founders who wanted to leave. I now owned 50% of the company, and Michael owned the other 50. But I didn't talk about it. Still drove my Toyota, still lived modestly, still showed up to family dinners in jeans and a sweater, while Emily showed up in designer clothes. And my family continued to think I was the struggling sister, the one who couldn't quite get her act together. Then, 3 months ago, my sister started dating Derek. Derek Preston, 28 years old, corporate consultant at a big firm, makes $85,000 a year and thinks he's a master of the universe. He's exactly the kind of guy Emily would date. Ambitious, arrogant, obsessed with status and appearances. They met through work connections, started dating. Within 2 months, Emily was bringing him to every family event. The first time I met Derek was on a Sunday dinner at my parents' house. He showed up in a suit on a Sunday for a casual family dinner. He shook my hand. "Olivia, Emily's told me about you. You're the one with the startup, right?" I said, "Yeah, software company." He said, "Nice. Still trying to make it work?" I said, "We're doing fine." He said, "That's great. It takes a lot of persistence. Most startups fail, but good for you for sticking with it." He said it like he was encouraging a child, like I needed his validation. I just smiled. Thanks. Over the next 2 months, Derek came to every family event, and at every event, he found a way to make a dig at me. At Thanksgiving, he asked in front of everyone, "Olivia, are you hiring or are you still just the 3 founders doing everything?" We had 45 employees by then, but I said, "We have a small team." He said, "Small team, right, so still early stages." I remember when Emily was in her early career stages. It's tough. At Christmas, he showed up talking about a big bonus he'd gotten, $5,000. He was so proud. He said to the family, "Emily and I are thinking about taking a trip to Europe with my bonus. We've worked hard this year. We deserve it." Then he looked at me. "Olivia, you should take a vacation too. When's the last time you took time off?" I said, I travel sometimes for work. He said, that doesn't count. You need to actually relax. Although I guess when you're trying to build a business, you can't really afford to take breaks. My sister laughed. Derek's right, Liv. You work too hard from that company. Maybe you should just relax and enjoy life more. I bit my tongue, because here's what they didn't know. I'd taken 4 weeks off the previous year, 2 weeks in Japan, 2 weeks in Italy, stayed in 5-star hotels, flew business class, spent $10,000 on those trips without blinking. But I didn't post about it on social media, didn't brag, didn't show off, so my family thought I was grinding away while barely surviving. The worst incident was at my parents' anniversary party. 40 people are there, extended family, my parents' friends, everyone. Derek stood up to give a toast. He was dating Emily for 4 months at that point, barely knew the family, but he appointed himself toast giver anyway. He talked about my parents, about their marriage, about family. Then he said, and it's wonderful to see how supportive this family is. Emily's told me how her parents have always encouraged both daughters. Emily's thriving in her corporate career, and Olivia's still pursuing her entrepreneurial dreams. Both paths are valid. He said entrepreneurial dreams like it was a hobby, like I was making jewelry on Etsy. People nodded politely. My mother looked uncomfortable. My father looked proud of Emily, tolerant of me. After the toast, Derek came up to me. Hey, no offense meant by that. I think it's cool that you're still chasing the startup thing. Not everyone has the guts to do that. I said, thanks. He said, Emily mentioned your company is in software. What exactly do you do? I said, project management tools, B2B. He said, interesting. Crowded space. How do you differentiate? I said, AI-powered automation, predictive analytics, enterprise integration. He nodded as he understood. He didn't. He said, cool. Well, good luck with it. If you ever want advice on how to scale or pitch to investors, I've worked with a lot of startups in my consulting work. I'd be happy to help. I said, that's kind of you. I'll keep that in mind. He walked away thinking he'd been generous, offering to help the struggling entrepreneur. What he didn't know, we'd already closed a Series B funding round, $20 million. Our company was valued at $42 million. We didn't need his advice. We needed nothing from him. But I let him think we did. Because I've learned something about arrogant men. The more you let them underestimate you, the sweeter it is when reality hits. The dinner happened 5 weeks ago, a regular family Sunday dinner. My parents, Emily, Derek, my aunt and uncle, and 2 cousins, 20 people total. We were at a restaurant this time, nice Italian place, private room in the back. I'd been working a lot that week. We were in the middle of a major product launch. I'd been in back-to-back meetings, putting in 12-hour days. I showed up to dinner in jeans and a sweater, hair in a ponytail, no makeup, exhausted. Derek showed up in slacks and a button-down. Emily is in a dress, both looking put together. We sat down, ordered food, started eating. Derek was holding court, talking about a big project at work, how he'd landed a major client, how impressed his boss was. My sister was beaming, proud of her successful boyfriend. My cousin asked me, Liv, how's work? I said, busy. We're launching a new product next week. Derek interrupted. Still at it with the startup? How many years has it been now? I said, 8 years. He whistled. Wow, that's dedication. Most people would have given up by now. I said, we're doing well. He said, I'm sure you are, but be honest. How much are you actually making? Startup salaries are usually low, right? The table shifted. Everyone looked uncomfortable. You don't ask people about their salary. I said, I do okay. He said, come on, between friends, what's your salary? I'm just curious how startup pay compares to corporate. I said, I'd rather not say. He laughed. That bad, huh?
Look, there's no shame in it. You're building something, eventually it'll pay off. But I bet right now, Emily and I are making way more than you. It's just the reality of startup life. Emily said, Derek, let's not. He said, No, it's fine. I'm just being real. Emily knows I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying corporate jobs pay better in the short term. That's just facts. I said nothing, just kept eating my pasta. He kept going. How much do you work? Like hours per week? I said, Depends on the week. Right now, a lot. Maybe 60 hours. He said, 60 hours a week and you're probably making what? 50,000, maybe 60? That's rough. You're making less per hour than someone working at Target. My cousin looked horrified. Derek, come on. Derek said, What? I'm just doing the math. Olivia is working herself to death for poverty wages. Meanwhile, Emily and I are making 40-hour weeks and making twice what she makes. I'm trying to encourage her to maybe reconsider her choices. My sister was laughing. Uncomfortable laughter, but laughter. My aunt said, Olivia's doing what she loves. That's what matters. Derek said, Sure, but at some point you need to be practical. I mean, look at her. She's 31 years old, living in a cheap apartment, driving an old car, no savings, no retirement account, all because she's chasing this startup dream. I put down my fork. I looked at him. I said very calmly, You don't know anything about my finances. He said, I know enough. Emily's told me. You're struggling. You've been struggling for years, and I think it's admirable that you keep trying, but maybe it's time to admit that it's not working and get a real job. There it was, a real job, like what I'd been doing for 8 years wasn't real. My father said, Derek, I think that's enough. Derek said, I'm just being honest. Someone needs to tell her. She's wasting her prime earning years on a company that clearly isn't succeeding. I smiled, actually smiled. I said, You think my company isn't succeeding?
He said, Well, you're not exactly living like it is. I mean, look at you. You look like you just rolled out of bed. When's the last time you bought yourself something nice? When's the last time you took a vacation? You're grinding yourself into the ground for nothing. I said, You're right. I do work a lot. He said, See? I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm trying to help. Emily's worried about you. We all are. You're 31. It's time to grow up and join the real world. I nodded. I appreciate the concern. I finished my dinner, I smiled through dessert, I hugged my parents goodbye, and I went home and made a phone call. When I got home that night, I called Michael, my co-founder and business partner. I said, Remember that meeting we have on Monday with Peterson Consulting? He said, Yeah, big potential partnership. Why? I said, Who's their point person? Who reached out to us? He said, Some VP, Gerald Peterson. He's the founder's son. Why? I said, Do me a favor. Pull up their team on LinkedIn. Look for someone named Derek Preston. I heard him typing. He said, Derek Preston, associate consultant. He's pretty junior. Why? I said, That's my sister's boyfriend, the one I told you about. He said, The asshole who keeps making digs at you? I said, Yeah. He just spent dinner mocking me in front of my entire family, called me unemployed, said I need a real job. Michael was quiet. Then he said, Does he know you own the company? I said, No, my family doesn't know either. I've kept it quiet. He said, Are you going to tell him? I said, No, I'm going to show him. Michael laughed. Oh, this is going to be good. What's the plan? I said, Monday's meeting. We go forward with it as planned, but I want to be very clear about who we are. I want it on record that I'm CEO and majority owner. I want his boss to know exactly who he's been trying to partner with. Michael said, And when his boss realizes his employee insulted you? I said, That's Derek's problem, not mine. Michael said, You're cold. I love it. Okay, Monday. Let's make this happen. I spent the weekend preparing, reviewing the partnership proposal, making sure every document, every presentation slide, every piece of material clearly identified me as CEO and founder. I also did some research on Derek, LinkedIn, company website. I found his profile. Derek Preston, associate consultant, 2 years at Peterson Consulting. Before that, generic corporate jobs, nothing impressive. His LinkedIn said he specialized in strategic partnerships and business development for high-growth tech companies. Interesting, because he clearly didn't recognize my company, didn't know that we were the ones his firm had been pursuing for 8 months. Peterson Consulting had reached out to us about a partnership. They wanted to integrate our project management software into their consulting services, offer it to their clients, create a white label version. It would be lucrative for us, potentially $5 million a year in revenue, but we didn't need it. We were doing fine without them. Still, we'd agreed to a meeting to hear them out. That meeting was Monday at 10 a.m. at their offices, downtown San Francisco. I picked out my outfit carefully, not jeans and a sweater, a black suit, fitted, professional, expensive, Salvatore Ferragamo, $3,000. Heels, subtle but expensive, another $800. Hair done, makeup on, looking every bit the CEO I actually was. I met Michael at our office that morning. We drove to Peterson Consulting together. He said, "You ready for this?" I said, "I've been ready for 8 years." Peterson Consulting's offices were nice. High-rise building, glass and steel, impressive reception area. Michael and I checked in. The receptionist said, "Mr. Peterson is expecting you. Conference room B, 3rd floor." We went up, walked into the conference room. 3 people were already there. Gerald Peterson, the VP and founder's son, mid-40s, silver hair, expensive suit. A woman I didn't recognize, probably from their business development team. And Derek Preston, sitting there in his cheap suit with his cheap tie, looking at his phone. He looked up when we walked in. His eyes passed over me, didn't recognize me. Not surprising, I looked completely different from the exhausted woman in jeans he'd seen 6 days ago. Gerald Peterson stood up, extended his hand. "You must be Olivia Chen, Gerald Peterson. Pleasure to meet you." I shook his hand. "Thank you for having us." He said, "This is Jenna Ross, our business development director, and Derek Preston, one of our associate consultants." Derek stood up, shook my hand, still didn't recognize me. I said, "Nice to meet you all." We sat down. Gerald started the meeting. He said, "Miss Chen, we've been very impressed with your company. Your software is exactly what our clients need. We think a partnership could be mutually beneficial." I said, "I appreciate that. Before we get started, let me clarify our structure. I'm CEO and founder. Michael here is co-founder and CTO. We own the company together, 50-50. Gerald nodded. "Understood. We've done our due diligence. Your company is valued at $42 million. The event attracts around $15 million annually. Very impressive for an 8-year-old company." Derek's head snapped up. He looked at me. Really looked at me this time. Recognition dawned. His face went white. I continued, as if nothing had happened. "We're open to partnership opportunities that make sense strategically, but we're very protective of our product and our brand. We'd need to understand exactly how you'd implement our software." Gerald said, "Of course, let me walk you through our proposal." For the next 20 minutes, Gerald presented. I asked questions, Michael took notes, Jenna contributed insights. Derek said nothing. He just stared at me, stunned. Halfway through the presentation, I interrupted. "I'm sorry, Gerald. Could I ask Derek a question?" Gerald looked surprised. "Derek? Sure." I looked at Derek. "Derek, have we met before? You look familiar." He said, "I don't think so." I smiled. "Are you sure? You don't remember meeting me at a family dinner where you spent about 15 minutes explaining to me and 20 other people that I was wasting my life on my startup, that I was basically unemployed, that I needed to grow up and get a real corporate job, like his?" I looked at Derek. Do you remember that conversation, Derek? Derek's face was bright red now. Olivia, I didn't know. I said, you didn't know I was CEO of the company your firm had been trying to partner with for 8 months. You didn't know that the little startup you kept mocking was worth $42 million? Gerald's face changed, went from confused to angry. Derek, is this true? Derek said, Mr. Peterson, I had no idea. I said, you had no idea because you didn't bother to ask. You made assumptions. You saw a woman in jeans and decided she was a failure. You saw someone who was quiet about their success and decided they didn't have any. Gerald said, Ms. Chen, I apologize on behalf of the firm. This is completely unacceptable. I said, I appreciate that, but let me be clear. Derek's behavior toward me personally is between him and me. However, his behavior reflects on your firm. He's been pursuing this partnership without apparently doing basic research on who he was pursuing. He didn't recognize the CEO of the company he was supposed to be courting. Gerald said, I assure you, Derek was not leading this partnership effort. He's been in a supporting role. I said, and yet he's in this meeting, representing your firm to a CEO he insulted days ago. I stood up. Michael stood with me. I said, Gerald, I appreciate your time today. The partnership opportunity is interesting, but I'm going to need some time to consider whether we want to work with a firm that employs people who conduct themselves the way Derek has. Gerald stood. Ms. Chen, please, let's not let one employee's mistake derail this opportunity. Derek will be removed from any involvement with your account. I said, it's not just about the account, it's about judgment. Derek had multiple opportunities to learn about my company, to do his research, to understand who he was dealing with. He chose not to. He chose to make assumptions instead. That tells me something about how your firm operates. I picked up my bag. I said, I'll be in touch. Thank you for your time. I walked out. Michael followed. As we got to the elevator, I heard raised voices in the conference room. Gerald's voice, angry. Derek's voice, defensive. The elevator doors closed. Michael said, that was beautiful. I said, that was necessary. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. First call, Emily, my sister. Olivia, what the hell did you do? Derek just called me crying. He said you humiliated him in front of his boss, that you're trying to get him fired. What is wrong with you? I said, calmly, Emily, what did Derek tell you about that meeting? She said, some client, I don't know. Why does it matter? I said, it matters because Derek has been pursuing a partnership with my company for 8 months without realizing it was my company. And when I walked into that meeting, he didn't even recognize me. Silence. I continued. And when I explained who I was, it became clear to his boss that Derek had insulted the CEO of a company they were trying to partner with, that Derek had called me unemployed, told me I needed a real job, mocked me in front of our family. Your company? What are you talking about? I said, Emily, I own a software company. I'm the CEO. I've been CEO for 8 years. The company is worth $42 million. I have 45 employees. We generate $15 million a year in revenue. I'm not unemployed. I never was. She said, that's not... Mom said you were still trying to make the startup work. You never said. I said, I didn't say anything because I didn't need to. I built my company quietly. I don't broadcast my success. But Derek assumed because I was quiet, because I wore jeans to family dinners, because I didn't show off, that I was a failure. And he mocked me for it, publicly. She said, Olivia, he didn't know. Exactly. He didn't know. He didn't bother to ask. He didn't bother to learn. He just made assumptions and treated me like I was beneath him. And now he's facing consequences for that. She said,
"You got him fired." I said, "I didn't get him fired. He got himself into this situation by insulting someone without knowing who they were. That's on him." She hung up. Second call, my mother. "Olivia, Emily just called me in tears. What happened? Did you really humiliate Derek at his work?" I explained everything: the dinner, the meeting, the revelation. My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You own a company worth $42 million?" I said, "Yes, Mom. I've owned it for 8 years. I'm CEO. I make $300,000 a year. I have stock options worth millions. I'm successful by any measure." She said, "Why didn't you tell us?" I said, "Because you never asked. You assumed I was struggling. You let Emily tell everyone I was barely making it. You all decided I was the failure in the family, and I let you think that because it didn't matter to me what you thought." "That's not fair. We worried about you." I said, "You pitied me. There's a difference." She said, "What about Derek? Emily says he might lose his job." I said, "Mom, Derek insulted me repeatedly. He called me unemployed in front of 20 people. He told me to grow up and get a real job. He has been treating me like I was less than him for months. And it turns out he was doing it while his firm was trying to partner with my company. That's not my fault. That's his." She said, "But he's family now. He's dating your sister." I said, "He's not family, and even if he was, that doesn't give him the right to treat me that way." Third call, Gerald Peterson. "Ms. Chen, I wanted to reach out personally. Derek Preston is no longer with our firm. He was terminated this afternoon." I said, "I didn't ask for that." He said, "I know, but what he did was unacceptable. He insulted a potential partner, he failed to do basic research, and he represented our firm poorly. That's grounds for termination." I said, "I appreciate you telling me." He said, "I also want to apologize again and to ask if you'd consider the partnership. Derek will have no involvement. I'll personally oversee the relationship." I said, "I'll think about it. I need time." He said, "Of course, take all the time you need." Fourth call, Derek. "Olivia, please, I lost my job. I didn't know who you were. If I'd known, I never would have said those things." I said, "Derek, that's the problem. You only regret it because I turned out to be someone important. If I'd actually been unemployed, if I'd actually been struggling, would you have cared? Would you have treated me differently?" He said nothing. I said, "You treated me poorly because you thought I was beneath you, because you thought I was a failure, because you made assumptions, and now you're facing consequences. Not because I'm vindictive, but because you made a massive professional mistake. You insulted someone without knowing who they were." He said, "I have a lease. I have bills. I need this job." I said, "Then you should have thought about that before you spent months treating people poorly, before you decided to mock someone in front of their family, before you decided that someone quiet about their success didn't have any." I hung up. That was 6 weeks ago. Derek is still unemployed. He's blacklisted in the consulting industry. Word spread about why he was fired. Nobody wants to hire someone who insults clients. Emily and Derek broke up 3 weeks after he was fired. She said she couldn't handle the stress. The truth is, she couldn't handle dating someone who wasn't successful anymore. My family knows the truth now. About my company, about my success, about who I actually am. My parents are proud, finally, now that they understand, now that they can tell their friends. But it's different now, because I don't need their pride anymore. I didn't need it then. I definitely don't need it now. My sister hasn't spoken to me since. She blames me for Derek losing his job, for their relationship ending, for exposing the lie she'd been telling about me. I don't care, because here's what I learned. People who underestimate you will always find a reason to feel like victims when reality proves them wrong. Derek didn't apologize because he was sorry for how he treated me. He apologized because I turned out to be someone important. If I'd actually been unemployed, if I'd actually been struggling, he would have felt justified. He would have thought he was right to mock me. That's not remorse. That's just regret for getting caught. I built a $42 million company while my family thought I was barely surviving. I did it quietly, without fanfare, without needing validation. And when someone mocked me for it, when someone decided to humiliate me in front of 20 people, I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I just let reality do the talking. My name is Olivia Chen. I'm 31 years old. I'm the CEO of a tech company worth $42 million. I make $300,000 a year. I have stock options worth millions. I'm successful by any measure. And 6 weeks ago, my sister's boyfriend called me unemployed. He lost his job. I gained the satisfaction of watching someone who underestimated me realize exactly how wrong they were. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me about being underestimated. Tell me about letting people think you were less than you are. Subscribe for more stories about people who